Hello, BIC podcast number 54. It is a new year, same us. Here we are on the Monday recording. It'll drop on the Tuesday. The Packers live, but for how long? And some semi-serious, possibly serious, who knows what kind of serious it is this show. Maybe it'd be 5% more mature, possible hobby predictions, and some randomized topics, the usual fare that you expect. Welcome to 2024 on the BIC podcast. Ah, yes. The gazing eyes of Favre are still upon us in 2024. He shall look to shine upon us, and once again, the content gods are to be praised. So, back for another year of this. We actually, coming off of this, technically, it's hours, really hours, after a very epic New Year's Eve live stream. So, thanks to folks that hung in there for that one. The after show actually went for quite a while. I won't say there weren't quite some spirited discussions. There certainly were, and Eric might have keeled over. He might have actually passed out and just woken up in the exact same state he was in.
Yeah. At 4:30 a.m., I gave up and left you guys to continue. I couldn't take
the problems of the hobby were being solved, Eric. No cost was too great. No cost was too great.
Yeah, we had some important people in the hobby, and joining us and talking after the show, and it went on and on and on and on, and I was totally involved and excited about the conversation. But then I looked at my watch and I went, it's 4:30 in the morning.
Hey, Eric, if this conversation continues going, we'll be celebrating 2025 by the time this thing's over.
Yeah. And I was like, I am way too old for this. It is past my bedtime, and I gotta call it a night. So I left.
Yes. Well, amongst us, there was a more responsible individual with more sense. Brandon, how are you?
I'm doing good. I did not stay up till 4:30. I did make it a little past 1. But I didn't stay up till 4:30. So, but enjoyed the bit that I was on last night. Waiting for Billy to get those boxes to me. So yeah.
Absolutely. So what I'll do is I'll start off with this just to get it going. So our friends at AMG Collectibles are still supporting the channel here. I believe I did actually receive a text message earlier today, which indicates to me that I believe we'll be recording the episode in this week and get back into the swing of things. The shop should be back up and running. We'll check out what happened with the sale, because there was the Boxing Week sale. So we'll see what they're doing with that. And we'll start talking some plans and things for 2024 with those guys as well. And Sherry will also be joining us to talk about some of the things related to what's going on in the shop. And part of that text message thread was also that I got a chance to see some cool stuff that came in the shop. There's actually some really nice stuff. I was able to check that out, and we'll definitely showcase some of those things. So amgcollectibles.ca and the AMG Collectibles YouTube channel. Thanks to them once again for supporting the channel and this podcast. So before I get into it, a couple of small topics that we'll touch on. One of the couple of things I wanted to mention. So a quick follow-up from the live stream that was last night. Hours when by the time we were recording this. One of the things was talking about Brian Gray's interview on Sports Card Live, a channel that, as you all know, I love more than life itself. But despite that, I did watch the interview itself, and I think there were some interesting pieces that came out of it. I won't go too much into depth on that because I leave it to you to check out yourself. So I will link it in the description with great reluctance, and I will do so if you want to check it out. Brian Gray is a very entertaining person. You may not agree with all of his takes, but he's very passionate about those takes, and he gives you a lot to chew on. So just to be 100%, to be 5% more mature and be accurate about this, he's got a lot of takes. So even if you don't agree with a couple, he's probably got 50 more. So what I would suggest to you is if you are interested, check it out. Listen to the angles that he took on a couple of the things. You can kind of go through it, and you're going to get some discussion on unlicensed products, which obviously he was very passionate about, working at Leaf and a lot of relations to that, talking about his own stance with what he's planning to do, his legacy, his approach, a lot of those aspects of what he's trying to do right now in his retirement. I put in quotation marks because more than likely we're going to see Brian Gray again. He already alluded to it a number of times. It felt a little bit almost like an audition. That's my perception based on the way he was saying it, and kind of outlining his role, where he feels his role could be, and almost pointing out some places potentially he could land in his usual way. He likes to tease a lot of potential things that could come down the pipeline, and also tease the possibility of creating more cards as his own entity, separate from the Leaf criteria category, with the being CEO formally. So it is an interesting conversation. So I'll leave a link to it in the description for you if you want to check it out in its entirety. It is like a 2.5 hour live stream on it. So you may want to check it out in chunks or whatever works for you. So that's one thing. Okay. So let's touch on a couple of things here. So first of all, I mentioned earlier, Packers live. For how long? Who knows? But they do control their own destiny, which is great. So I do appreciate that. Not quite in the J. Rob pumping category. I still don't know how to feel about the Jordan Love thing. So I've actually made some offers and some overtures to a couple of Jordan Love cards. It's like, I'm liking how the kid's playing. I don't want to get caught in. I don't want to pull a Bobbles and sit on it too long. I go, I should probably get one of these cards. I should just start making. I'm going to at least make a couple of offers and see. I'm not going to try to pay too much, but I'll make a couple of. I like the way the kid's playing. What I'll say is this: I like that he's got almost 4,000 passing yards, and I like that he's third in the league in touchdown passes. He's not an MVP candidate, and I'm not worried about that. But he's played well with what they've got, what they've had, and the receiving core as it's been. I've liked what I've seen. I've liked the development over the course of the season. That is encouraging. Will that carry over to next season? Who knows? But is he earned the right to come out there again? Yeah. You'll see some plays and some throws where it's like, man, that's talent. That's pretty good. And then you'll see some like, oh dear God, why did you make that pass? Why? My eyes. So you're going to make it's get a little bit both, but he's a rookie. So you're like, you can accept that your mistakes are going to be made, but he'll also show some flashes where it's like, okay, maybe this will be the guy down the road. Doesn't have to be a Hall of Fame quarterback. If I would take pretty good. If he's pretty good and then you build a decent team around him, that's fine. I can work with that. But so that's kind of my thought on it. I enjoyed it during the live stream. I was able to watch the Packers win, so that was fun, and I didn't have to sweat it. It was actually a pretty good score and a pretty good game overall by them. Minnesota's not at their 100% either, but it was a good performance. I did enjoy it. So I'll quickly transfer it over to you, Brandon. Right now, things are looking good. I think Lamar has more or less sewn up the MVP, I feel like.
Well, I mean, let's be fair. I was sweating that game. It was posted in the Discord. Remember last year of what happened when we were up 21 on Miami and it was like thrown back. And so I had to sweat a little bit when we were up by 22. But as far as Lamar, I think he's shown this year that he can actually be a quarterback and he doesn't just have to be a running back. And I'm staying optimistic because we've had a very, very good season before. I mentioned it in the Discord. I'm curious to see how they play, like how next week plays out, because I hope they play him at least half of the game. I don't want them sitting him next week and then having the bye week and then going in, because if I remember right, it was 2019. That same scenario happened and they came out, fell flat on their face and played like crap. So I don't want, and I hate to even do this to you, Eric, but I don't want a good regular season team. I want a team that can actually advance and be a contender in the playoffs, and they're playing really well. Mark Andrews may be back for the playoffs. That would, boost that offense up a bit more. The defense has played well, and it's exciting to see where they can go. But I'm staying very, very, very optimistic. So.
All right, sounds fair. I appreciate, regardless, I appreciate there being something at stake in the last game of the season. I appreciate that there is an opportunity they can play and they're in, so that's cool. And then for your team, it's kind of figure out what kind of preparation you're going to have going into the postseason. So if you already locked yourself up, then it's just like, all right, make sure you're in the right combination of rested, but also still sharp. So figuring out that combo, that balance. And I think that's basically what you're referring to. It's just finding that balance to make sure that you don't get hurt. You don't want to get hurt in a game that doesn't necessarily change things for you, but you also don't want to be going in cold and having to actually play on other set of teams. And it's kind of important to be prepared. It is one game playoffs after all. So that sounds good. So quick random thing I wanted to throw at you guys. I actually was listening. I mentioned that podcast that was the kind of the spiritual successor to that one that I had mentioned previously from back in the video game one. I did make a joke. I think it was with you, Brandon. I think you made a reference to a video game thing. And in your comment section, I said, oh, I'm looking forward to play through Pong.
Playthrough, yeah.
That'll be exciting. I think that'll be a good time. But I did hear one thing, though. I was listening to podcasts kind of as background noise because, as I said, the podcast for me, I'm not in video games, but I enjoy it for the bantering. For me, it's good background noise for that. It's just a relaxing podcast. But they mentioned one thing that kind of reminded me of something and also kind of struck me. And like I said, this is more of a random tangent for a second. They mentioned Street Fighter 6. And I was like, wait, they're only at 6? So I had to go to the Google machine and I was like, wait. It's like, dude, Street Fighter 2 came out in like 1991. How are we only at 6? What the hell's going on? Like, what kind of weird insane. Mortal Kombat is on like 10 or 11 or 12.
Well, I think, and you can look it up if you want and confirm. I think the new Mortal Kombat that's going to be coming out is actually titled Mortal Kombat 1.
I agree, but here's the thing. Regardless, though, it is coming after like 10 or 11. So regardless, we're still talking. Even if we don't continue the numbering system, it still threw me. Like, to put it this way, so I've got it up in front of me here. The first one was Street Fighter, which really has nothing to do with Street Fighter 2. Street Fighter 2 is kind of its own deal, but technically it's under Capcom. So, whatever. That was 1987. So that was on the Nintendo. That was a different game. Street Fighter 2 is the one that we're familiar with. That's that one that came out. That's 1991. Then Street Fighter Alpha, 1995. Street Fighter EX, I don't even remember that one, 1996. Street Fighter 3, 1997. So between 91 and 97, we got from 2 to 3. So there was a gap there. I understand. Okay, fine. Street Fighter 4 didn't come out until 2008. It took 11 years to get to 4. Then another 8 years to get to 5. And in 2023, they came out with Street Fighter 6. I'm like, it has taken you 32, almost 33 years to get to 6? From 2 to 6? What are we doing with our lives? What's going on over here? I'm aging rapidly as we speak.
People must have been really happy with the previous Street Fighter, and there wasn't a call by the fans to make another one.
I guess so. I just feel like it's one of those things where I don't expect a fighting game. I don't want a fighting game, another iteration every year or every 2 years or whatever. I just think it was hilarious to me that, like, after 30 years, guys, we made it to 6. We were going from 2. We were at 2.
I remember going to the arcade, because that's what you did 100 years ago, and playing, Street Fighter on the big arcade machine, and that was cool. That was. I mean, there was a line for it.
Yeah.
It was. I think it's got to be one of the first fighting games, and the graphics compared to, Pac-Man, it was revolutionary.
Wow, it was no Pong, but fair enough.
On games of 6s, and it's not quite as long as the one you're referencing, but a game that a lot of people are familiar with is GTA, Grand Theft Auto, and GTA number 6 is preparing for a release.
Yeah, that one had a very convoluted history to get from 5 to 6.
Yeah, well, from 5 to 6 took 10 years.
Yeah.
GTA 3 came out in 2001. I just looked it up to confirm, but 5 to 6 was a 10-year period. So
I played
some
3.
of those games have stretches. I
played 3, I want to say, on the PlayStation 2. I'm pretty sure 3 was the PlayStation 2, if memory serves me. Because 2000, you said 2001, right?
Yeah, 01. It
should have. GTA 3.
It would have been. It would have been the. It should have been the PlayStation 2, I believe. It might have even had a PS1 version.
It might have, yeah. It was on PS2, because I remember the cover. I remember the cover of this game. I actually had it. I owned a copy of this one. So I played it. Yeah, so I played it on PS2, and it was out on a bunch of systems at that time. PlayStation 2, you could play it on Windows, you could play it on Xbox. You were able to play in a couple different ones. So October 2001, that's when that one came out. I remember playing the hell out of that game. And Grand Theft Auto, in fairness, let's be fair about this. So here's a question. I don't know if by that point, Brandon, you would have been playing games like that. Did you play that Grand Theft Auto around that time or no?
I was never into the game much. My sons played it though, so I am familiar with it. I played it here or there, but it wasn't.
Okay.
I'm not into the third-person shooter type stuff. So.
Well, it's more of like an open world kind of thing, but yeah, fair enough. But look, I'll just put this and we'll kind of move on. But I want to since you brought up Grand Theft Auto, and I love that game. I played a lot of hours of it. But when I'm saying play the game, just to be fair, what I'm actually saying is I punched in a lot of the codes so that I had a lot of ammo. I would literally run around just having crime spree after crime spree. # on brand. Eric, this is where we act not surprised. Like, I don't think I got through like 10% of that game. I think I spent most of the time committing crime spree. Eric, you can get a tank. You could literally have a tank and just roll through the
and all
streets.
the badges and have like the helicopters and all that stuff come after you.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, in fairness, we're talking games here, and I know Eric is probably still patiently waiting on like Grandpa Pac-Man because they had Miss Pac-Man and Pac-Man Jr. He's waiting
Well, he's
on
waiting on
Grandpa
your playthrough
Pac-Man.
of Pong because that's his speed. He goes, wait, I love this one. I could never get past this stage. Thank you, Brandon, for showing me how.
I played a lot of Pong. I know you joking, but I played a lot of Pong.
I believe this. I believe this. I believe this to be
I
true.
don't know. So there was, I don't remember the name of the game. I don't think I played a lot of Pong at all growing
Pong,
up.
it has to be a very specific. Look, here's the thing. We joke about how old Eric is, and he's old. But the thing is, we got to do like a math. It's a math problem because the problem is Pong. Like I played the Atari because my dad got an Atari.
Yeah.
That was like our first game system we played on. So even
Yeah.
though I kind of had already aged out of it, we still had the Atari and we played the Atari because the games were simple. When I was a small kid, my dad would be like, "Yeah, I'll get the Atari and then we'll play those games with the controller and stuff." We did have the Nintendo, but the Nintendo's out by the mid 80s. So like I said, Eric's old, but like by the mid 80s, he had to be at least in his early 80s by then. So like, at that point, that's different. Pong though, Pong's like heyday really was like the 70s
That's what I
into
was thinking.
the
It was-
80s.
It got developed in the late 70s. So
Yeah,
in the early 80s, I was playing a bunch of it with people's houses, my house, whatever.
Yeah. And then by the time Atari comes out, yeah, you can still play Pong if you want to, but with Atari, you could play other games. You had some other options. Pong's biggest moment, strongest time was when you had the individual Pong consoles, the things you would connect to the TV, and it was just Pong. That's what it was. By the time you get to the Atari, you can use the cartridges and play other things as well.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's by the late 70s as Atari's coming out, and then by the early 80s, Atari's kind of hitting its zenith, apex. It's like I want to say the video game crash. Somebody can fact check me, but I want to say the video game crash was like 83-ish, right around that time period. So that would have been around when they had a crash, and then by the late 80s, Nintendo brings it back. So there was a little bit of a crash there, and then Nintendo was able to resurrect it by the mid to late 80s. Super Mario and everything took over. There you go, off to the races, and then we're on to today. But yeah, Pong had its brief run, but it was very simplistic. You had one game. Your playthrough is you connect the one thing in there and play your Pong until you get bored of it. That's what you got. You can have Pong, Pong, or Pong.
Yep.
So
those are your choices.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Played lots of it.
Makes sense. And that's Video Game Corner, sponsored by no one. I thought I would bring it up by my recoiling horror that we're only on Street Fighter 6. I can only hope that we'll get to Street Fighter 7 before I retire. Officially.
Since we talked a little video game stuff,
sure,
I'll give a little teaser of an idea. I may actually move this whole room downstairs, but if I don't, and thinking about that corner back there, moving that little plastic shelf and extending a TV stand from the corner over to where the doorway is. And I have a retro TV out in the garage that does work.
A CRT. Yep.
Yep. And I have all of the original, like the beginning runs of the Nintendos and everything. I have a Genesis and all that. And I thought about hooking them all up back there, making some sort of like little display or something with the old TV and giving the room another little element of relaxation.
So all I'm hearing is the new channel coming up, Bowser's and Pong. It's like it looks like Bobbles and Ballparks, but it's
no. Just
where else are we gonna get a Pong walkthrough, man?
I'll have to get Eric over to show me play.
Yeah, that might have to be how it goes. We'll use his expertise. We'll need his Pong walkthrough
like this.
Yeah. So for the audio folks, during that explanation, Brandon was literally pointing behind him to a dark void of dark magic. So if you can't see the YouTube channel, it's like this portal to another realm where he fights Pong creatures. Yeah, where he fights Pong creatures. So that's what he was doing. Again, if it's audio only, that's what was happening. And then Eric is demonstrating this by basically stabbing a small child. That's what he was doing when he was giving hand gestures. And then Brandon's like, I understand. Thank you, Eric. We appreciate you. For the audio people so that you can visualize it. That's what happened. Just thought it would help.
That's 5% more mature. Good. Small child.
Listen, what you were doing over there is not my concern. I was merely translating for the audio audience. That's what was happening. This will be a very entertaining 2024. I can see it right now. All right, let's move on. Let's move on. So let's actually get into kind of the main topic thing. It is a new year, so we're not going to make it too long an episode, but we're gonna have a little fun with this. We're gonna let's do a little twist. We talked about doing kind of a predictions thing, but let's do a little bit of a twist on this. There are different kinds of predictions we can have. I think we did touch on a similar thing, so let's have a little bit of a twist on it. For the prediction side of it, you can take the same kind of angles that you did before on it, but maybe fixate your attention on kind of put it in the context of what is it that you think we'll be looking at and like talking about by this time towards the end of next year. By the time we get into the next one, so for the next calendar year, you can predict whatever. Eric talked a little bit about on the live stream, and also I think when we did discuss it briefly, he talked about the thought that there would be less people in the hobby. So let me challenge you a little bit. If that's the prediction you're going with, great. Okay, so let's say that happens. Let's say your prediction comes to pass. What do things look like? What are we talking about? What kind of conversations are we having in November, December of 2024, if that comes to pass? So not only the prediction, but tell us what things are looking like if your vision comes to pass. So take a moment to think about that. And I'll start first. I already said earlier, one of the things, like I said, we had a similar topic, but let me expand on it with this premise in mind. I mentioned the Cards HQ thing. We did have some feedback on that episode. We're talking about it like, off the top, Geoff said that he wouldn't be necessarily trying to do the live selling on day one. And I agreed. And in the episode, we did mention that. He did mention that it was going to be eased in, but I do think he's going to try it. And I want to see him try it because I think it'll be interesting to see what that looks like. And I said, my original prediction concept was, I think he'll try it. And then I don't think it'll work necessarily the way he's done it. I think he's going to have to give it a little bit of runway. But then towards the latter portion of the year, by that point, if my prediction's right, he would have tried it. It wouldn't have worked necessarily the way he wanted to, and he would have had to pivot. If he went down the path that I think he would, then that would require him to build a more robust e-commerce platform. If he has to do that kind of thing, then I do think, even if he doesn't already have everything completely sewn up, in order to make that viable, to extend my prediction, I think he's also going to have to fully be in 100% the Fanatics camp. He's got to have everything locked in, locked down, conversations, contracts, whatever he needs to do, have everything ready to go, because he's going to have to lean on that e-commerce platform. And I do think he'll still be trying to do the breaking, because he's invested too much theoretically in the design to have so many breaking booths, not to make that one of the main pillars of his. So he's going to need that allocation. Well, if Fanatics is the big player in the game, he's going to need to have Fanatics on side to get that product. And by that point, I think those will become the focus points. Long term, beyond 2024, we can have a discussion down the road. But I think in the early days, he'll try those experiments. Some of them won't work. And if he gives them a little bit of runway, I think towards the latter part of the year, we'll know which ones work and which ones don't, and which ones have been scrapped. So that's kind of what my vision is as far as where I see that going, depending on where our hobby climate goes. So I gave you guys a little bit of time there. Eric said, with the concept, you said that you think people are going to go out of the hobby. So, and if you want to add a different prediction to it, you certainly can. But assuming it comes to pass, so what do things look like towards the end of the year if that comes to pass by the end of the year?
Well, I think you're going to see prices continue to come down in some of these cards that have ballooned over the last few years. I still say we will not get below pre-pandemic prices. I think we have reached a new plateau in worth of cards and memorabilia. So I think those prices are still going to stay higher than pre-pandemic, but I think there's still room for them to come down to earth some. I think there's still some hanger-ons that are trying to move some mid to high grade stuff. You're still going to have to pay $1 million for a Mickey Mantle and a Babe Ruth, and that's just the way that is. Right? That's not going to change because rich people don't care. But for those who are watching their money and do care, I think you're going to see some of the prices come down, and that makes sense because if people leave a hobby, now there's not as much demand, so the prices have to come down. It's the whole supply and demand thing. Everyone came in during the pandemic, it got flooded, prices went up because of supply and demand and newfound interest. People are going to continue to leave. I think based partly on all the corruption and the belief that there's more corruption out there, and people are just sick of it. Some of the people wrap it up as negativity in the hobby. No, yeah, there's negative people everywhere. I can't go buy milk at the store without running into someone who's negative. I'm not going to stop buying milk. But if I find out that there's corruption in selling me the milk, I may try to drink orange juice instead.
Or mayonnaise.
Shut up.
See, I held back. I held back. So going back to the year-end videos, that wasn't me. Just point of order. That was not I.
No, he's a fire starter. He is. He's bad. Bad. And we have documented this. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Brandon right now, Brandon is the bad Santa. By the way, great movie. If you guys want, the first Bad Santa was a fantastic movie. Very fun. Great movie. I enjoyed it quite a bit. You have to have a twisted sense of humor to really enjoy it, and I do.
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
So I think corruption is going to be a part of people leaving. I think economics also, prices will come down, and I think you'll also start seeing, because you've already seen a ton, but I think you'll also start seeing card businesses, brick and mortar, that are hanging on by the skin of their teeth, won't survive the year.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'll quickly add something to it. So again, I'll play with your scenario, your hypothetical scenario that you laid out. That's why I said I wanted to do a little twist on the prediction thing. I wanted to kind of think through the thought experiment of your scenario playing out. So if that happens, one of the other things that I would see if we go down that path would be that Fanatics' continued move towards being either direct to consumer or taking the distributors completely out of the game, for the most part, would mean that a lot of the pre-existing deals that some of these shops have with distribution. So that was one of the conversations I was having, because one of the folks we were talking about in the alleged post show is in the distribution side of the business. And one of the questions I had was pertaining to thoughts on the distribution side of the business, and got a little feedback on that. So I appreciated having that perspective, that angle. But if that's the case, then the distributors are going to have to pivot. They're going to have to find other ways to make money. And that was part of what was discussed. But then also, in addition, the shops themselves are going to have to go like, okay, that's why I said about the Cards HQ thing. If that's going to play out, then if you're in charge of that and you're relying on breaking as one of your pillars in that scenario, you need allocation. You need boxes. You need supply. You need to get them from somewhere. And if Fanatics is controlling more of their own distribution, then you basically got to get on the list. One way or the other, if you need that allocation, you got to get on that list and be a part of that so that you're getting the supply. Otherwise, you get cut off. Shops that are relying on that right now, to Eric's point, they would be the ones to bleed out first, because it's such a cash-heavy business. You need all this money to be buying all this product that you may or may not be able to sell. The current model is broken. This can be a bigger conversation for later, because we can save this for next episode. That'll be a little bit more regular. We can talk about the broken model, because the model is 100% broken right now. And it's been broken for a long time. It's being exacerbated by the current scenarios and the way this is playing out. But the model was always a little bit busted, even going back to the 90s and the 80s, which I can speak to just having lived it. It was broken back then. But when cash is moving everywhere and everybody's got money to spend, we can kind of get by. We can make it work. But if you don't have the cash to play, and you're relying on some kind of credit or whatever it is to keep the lights on and to keep the flow, you get these boxes in, you need to get those boxes out, and you need to sell it so that you get enough cash to be able to rob Peter to pay Paul. And you got to keep doing this back and forth, back and forth. If you don't have the cash to hang in there, if it doesn't sell on day one, you get into a cash crunch. But if suddenly I cut off your supply and you can't even get the lifeblood to keep the flow going, all of a sudden you can't rob Peter to pay Paul because it just stopped. The wheels have stopped turning. That's when you run into the scenario with the shops. That's where all of a sudden only the strong survive, and the ones who have that access to that lifeline. Because the ones that don't, all of a sudden run out of gas. They don't have enough blood flowing through the veins, and their heart just stops. Patient's dead. So something to think about, because that's going to be part of the equation too. It's not just the economics. That's a factor. It's not just the corruption piece. That's a factor. But it's also the actual supply lines that the hobby and these businesses are operating on are being impacted and affected every single day. In addition to those other factors, all that can play into it. And that'll change the ecosystem. That will completely change the ecosystem if that's the case. You get rid of those shops, that's one less outlet for the stuff to go out. Maybe it becomes direct to consumer. Maybe Fanatics sells you the hobby boxes directly, more so than they already are. They make it direct. And then, okay, what are they going to do? The shops that are going to survive are probably going to do singles. They're probably going to sell other stuff like they did in the 90s when things started to dry up. They sold Beanie Babies for a while, then they sold other things and trinkets and whatever, just to keep the lights on and to keep operating. So they weren't just relying on the one thing. Brennan, any thoughts on that, or any thoughts on a prediction you might have that you want to expand on a little bit?
I think Eric's correct in the fact that things are going to continue to decline, but I don't know that I don't know to what extent to
Sure.
throw a prediction out. I don't want to be too doom and gloom,
Okay.
but it has. We've already seen the change with the values and everything else. That was a given. We knew that was coming. We didn't need Nostradamus to tell us that. We knew that was unsustainable. But we also know that a lot of the boom and the interest and the volume of people that came in was coaxed in because of those values. And as the values continue to be less than, exciting, and the saturation and the products, all of that continue to rise, you're going to have folks lose interest because the well's going to run dry. They're not going to have, those base cards that they're flipping for a ton of money that they can put back into the hobby. I think the other side to it, you mentioned the allocation and what Fanatics does, whether it's direct or whatever, but we don't really know the direction Fanatics is going to go or what's going to happen with the football and basketball market. Like, that's still kind of an unknown. We know the rights holder currently is Fanatics, but what is their plans? Like, what are they going to offer us? Are they going to stay with the same product lines that they have for baseball, but just put the other sports in them? What is the price points they're going to go for? Because, we've had this discussion over in the Discord. The belief is, well, Fanatics is going to make football product, price reasonably. But we see that Panini has put such an exorbitant price tag on football, on basketball, and people are buying it. Fanatics is in this wanting money. They spend a lot of money to get these licenses and all of this. Why are they going to cut themselves short? Like, there's questions there. So I think that will determine kind of the direction that things go as well. But I do overall think that when we sit down, heading into the holidays or probably even summertime, the national coming up, I think the buzz will be a lot lower because it's just that excitement it isn't still there. It isn't still buzzing. You hear more complaints about things and as Eric threw out the term that people don't like to hear, but negative stuff, you hear more of that than the excitement of the hobby anymore. Like the talk and the vibe is negative. So
He invoked the vibes. That's problematic. He invoked the vibes, and now they're negative vibes. It's bringing us down. It's harshing my mellow, Eric. It's harshing my mellow. Question though, and like I said, it's a fair conversation, but here's the question that I would pose. In the same vein as what we talked about, I was just looking at it from the distribution side. You're right. We don't know what the licensing situation is going to be. That is going to be a factor. That's really important. We're going to need to know what that looks like. We're going to need to know what the product lines are going to look like. So just reiterating what you're saying, I agree. The other piece of the puzzle, though, and maybe you can touch on this and just give some thoughts on it. Another piece of the puzzle that has been part of the ecosystem previously, and it's still holding right now. Like I saw that the numbers for the month end, for December came in, and the gem rate data is showing that there's still pretty strong amount of submissions for grading. And it's been consistent, 1,000,000 plus for PSA, 100,000 for SGC, and the number Beckett took a slip, CGC took a slip, but CGC is still doing overall. If we count both TCG and sports cards, if we combine the two, it's still grading a fair number of cards. Beckett has slipped, but even then, as much as Beckett has struggled, they graded 50,000. which is not as good as you'd think, given where they had been in the hobby from a branding perspective at one point. But they've made so many missteps, I'm not shocked. But even then, if you've screwed up almost every way possible and you're still managing to get 50,000 cards in a month, that's still something. Like you're hurting, but you're not dead. 50,000 per month, over the course of a year, that'd be 600,000 cards. If you maintain that over the course of a year, it means you're grading the better part of 750,000 cards in a year.
Are they staying consistent at the 50,000? Because my thing and the concern with them is I don't know what their turnaround time looks like. And just because their number going out the door is 50,000, it would be interesting to know the number that comes in the door.
Well, the thing is, after you do it over the course of a year or two, so I'll grab the gem right here as I go in and talk about it. But if you go month by month and you're seeing that they're hovering, because when they're doing the numbers, so I've got it now in front of me. December, 52,000, which was down from November, where they did 60. In October, they did 75. In September, they did 61. In August, they did 75. In July, 57. So June, Beckett did 74. Beckett did 66 in May. So I'm being actually conservative with the 50K. They actually cleared it pretty comfortably every single month throughout the course of a year. The only time they dip below 50K in a month, it looks like, no, that actually goes all the way back to December 22. So year over year, believe it or not, they actually graded more cards on a month-to-month basis than their worst month of 22 because they never dipped below 50K. So I'll just using 50K as a baseline. But if I say 50K and you just kept that average, even though they exceeded that average a couple different times. So even if you got a backlog, it's not a 12-month backlog. So there's been cards have come in over the course of the year that have been graded that are included in these numbers.
So you're asking why is this still happening? I think is what right. So
what I'm actually saying is if that's the worst,
yeah,
it could be worse. And if they've made as many errors as they have, and they're still able to at least sustain that level, again, I'm not saying they're running it well. I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying they've actually botched this horrifically. But what does it say about whatever equity they have left with somebody that they're able to still get cards in the door month after month?
This is just throwing this out there.
Go ahead.
And I don't have the numbers pulled up, and this is just simply throwing it out. If I had to guess, a large percentage of their number is going to be TCG and probably thicker stocked cards.
Yeah,
I know it would be tough to dictate and actually pull that data out. I think GemRate might show the TCG number, but we wouldn't know but we wouldn't know like patch cards and stuff like that. I say that because I know that the TCG market does. They may not be high on Beckett, but they will try them on a lot of the cards because of the black label. And Pokemon, especially with the Japanese ones, the quality is usually really good, and there is a case where black labels are more easier to get on those cards. So I do know that market still has an interest with Beckett.
The reason this is happening is because sellers, whether they're private, one-on-one sellers, eBay sellers, people working at shows, people working at shops, still believe the only way to get, to make money is to sell cards in plastic cases with numbers on them. And they think that is the only way to increase the value of them and make money. So they have to spend money sending these things in. And we all know with PSA, you got the PSA tax if you have a good card. And then they hope that then they can then turn it around and make a couple of dollars. I think you're going to see a change in that. I think this is still left over from the pandemic craze of everything has to be graded. I think people are going to start backing away from that because they're getting sick and tired of it. Plus all the issues that they're having at grading companies and low numbered cards getting backdoored, and there's more of them than there should be, and all this other stuff that's happening. There's no reason to grade a card that you just pull in 2024, that you open up a pack of cards and you pull it out and put it into a plastic sleeve. You don't need to grade it. So I think slowly people are going to start realizing you don't need to grade this much. If you have something that's older, that is valuable, okay. But to send base cards in from Series 1 Upper Deck, that shit's got to stop.
So here's the question. So let's just pose this question. We'll kind of then, if there's nothing else to add then from the prediction side of it, then let's offshoot into this discussion here to wind down the conversation. We'll talk about this for a couple minutes, just since you brought it up. So then what's to say about the notion? Because the prices, started coming down more than a year ago. I would say even maybe towards the tail end of 21 into 22, things were already beginning to slide. They had already apex, like the apex had already happened. And it's been consistent. There's been different markets that have slid faster than others. There's been some different movements between it, but the prices haven't been going up. They for the most part, they've been sliding on a lot of stuff, especially the high end stuff, really expensive stuff. $1 million cards went down 30% or whatever it is, depending on the item. So you've had that. But the conversation, the argument was, okay, so all this was booming this. So we can say that we had the entirety of 2022, and the entirety now of 2023, the whole year. And we've been on basically better part of a 2-year slide on prices, declining. PSA's grading is up 16% year over year. And 22 was higher than 21. It's up. SGC is up 58% year over year. 58%
Because the
year over year.
belief is, if you're a seller, this is the only way to make money. And
Are they wrong though?
I think it's going to fade out. I think right now they're holding on to the pandemic boom, and this is what they think everyone wants and needs, and they're sending in 300, 400, 500 cards and thinking this is the only way. People will not buy cards unless they're in plastic holders with numbers on them. And I think it was a fad.
A 30-year fad?
No. Fad with the explosion from a few years ago.
Yeah, but just to be clear, though, in the spirit of being factual, half of the PSA grading is TCG. Half of the TCG, it has nothing to do with sports cards. What you think about what the sports card market is doing, they don't care. The pokies don't care.
The pokies got excited during the boom too.
They're higher than they were before.
Yeah,
it's literally it's and SGC's growth is more based on the sports card because SGC is not grading as many Pokemon cards. They tried to make some inroads on it. They have been successful doing those like Bowman draft specials and stuff like that. So they've had a couple of those that have done well for them.
So I will speak on the behalf of that.
Go ahead.
Their number is very heavily supported because of the $9 specials.
Yeah.
And I think you were trying to get to the point, maybe it kind of seemed like you were on that path of maybe asking, do we see grading prices come down or grading?
My general question. So Eric was going in one tack. So my original tack was going to be, I wanted to ask you first, and then the rest of us could talk about it. I wanted to see the idea, if we're going to see declines coming in through the next year, continual, the grading numbers have still been strong. My original point was just taking the numbers as they've been. The grading numbers have been strong. It's reasonable to expect they're going to come down. But Eric is trying to combine two things. He's combining the market depressing things, but he's also adding in that, okay, people are suddenly going to be sick of grading. Remember, his thesis a moment ago was there was an over-reliance on the grading to sell the items. I can tell you that I can put in an equivalent card. I can put in a raw copy and I can put in a graded copy, and I can price them in ratio accordingly. The graded copy still goes out the door faster. That is not a guess. That has happened. I've literally had cards side by side each other. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to send every card for grading, but it is not wrong that the graded version does two things. It does enhance liquidity on quite a number of cards. And it also eliminates just a different side benefit. It eliminates the grading conversation. It eliminates the message I get on eBay where it says, hey, on the scan, is there like a speck in the corner or like and all of a sudden you have to have like a whole debate about grading that you did not have to have on the other one. The other one, whether you like it or not, they just looked at the top of the label and they said, okay, it says 9 or it says 10. Okay, that's what I'm buying. Great. Buy now or offer or whatever the case is going to be. And out the door it goes. So as a seller, I have saved some time. My time has some value. And I've saved a certain amount of energy that I don't have to worry about. In some cases, if the card company, if the grading company already took scans, like an SUC or a PSA already took scans, I think to take the serial number, I can literally download the picture from them, use their scan, and use that on my eBay listing. I've done that. It's a nice time saver sometimes if they have it available. That's great. So it does enhance certain things. I'm not going to say that every card needs to be graded, but I'm also not going to blame people that are trying to move certain cards. It's less of a pain in the ass to move some of these cards, especially if they're reasonably liquid, in those holders. Because the question is, and I'll throw it back, I'll open it up to you guys, whatever direction you want to go, but I'll throw this back. Eric is looking at it from the perspective, he was saying that, people are going to, okay, if I go to a card show and I tell you raw card here, graded card here, they're both looking pretty nice. This one's, let's say, in a 9 holder, not even the 10. We're not even going to worry about the gem mint tax. Okay, $100 for the graded one, $85 for the ungraded one. You save some money getting the ungraded one.
They're going to buy the graded for 2 reasons. A,
yep,
it's already in the holder.
Correct.
And you don't have to send it in, pay the submission and all that. B, the perception in this hobby is, well, you have this one graded and this one raw. There's got to be something wrong with this one, or you would have it graded as well. That is a perception that happens no matter the case. The dealer could have just gotten it from the guy that just left his table in a trade. Who knows? But because that one's ungraded, it has a flaw, and this one's graded, so he didn't send this one in because it has a flaw.
Okay.
They're going to buy the graded.
Follow-up question. Same scenario. I present the 2 cards in front of you. I'm going to start off at that price point. So you say that all things being equal in this situation, you'll pay a small premium, because I made the premium small in this case. I didn't make the premium big. I made it small. So you say all things being equal, I'll take a little less. I'll pay a little extra for less risk because I've already got what's in this holder. It's already marked down, whatever. It's got something going for it. Okay. Let's say you look at the 2. They seem to your eye to be fairly similarly graded, but the difference between the 2 in price is small. How much do I have to decrease the price of the raw copy to get you to take the risk back into your own hands? So I started off at 185. I made the gap between the 2 small. So Brandon, I'll start with you. How much do I have to lower the price of the raw copy to make it worth your while to go like, okay, you know what? Even if I want to get a grade, or if I don't, at this price point, I'll take it. I'll take it in this scenario. How much do I have to decrease the price of the raw?
Is this scenario a card for myself or a card to flip?
You can give me one answer for one and one answer for the other. So if it's different, you can give me the differences.
If it's a card for myself, I'm going to buy the graded copy because, again, I know what I'm getting. $15 is,
No, but my point was, if I lower the price on the raw copy, how much lower do I need to make it for you to make that the more interesting prospect? If you've got a chance to look at them both, they look to be similarly graded. First, the premium small, and you're saying in that scenario, yeah, take the graded one. You may as well. But if I lower the price, how much lower do I need to make the raw copy to make you go in that direction?
Well, I mean, in this scenario, I'm not trying to make this difficult, but if we're looking at a 9 and a raw, we know that in the market, a raw is valued about approximately the same price as a 9.
Yep.
If they look similar, I honestly probably wouldn't have any interest. I mean, well, let me take that back. It would depend on what it is. If it's just a simple card that I'm looking to pick up, and you had it at, I don't know, $30 cheaper, $40 cheaper, $25 cheaper, I'm going to save the money and buy the raw copy, throw it in a one touch.
That's the answer. That's what I'm asking. I'm saying there is a price. So between the 2, I'm starting off with a small gap. With a small gap, you're like, screw it, give me the graded one then. But if I make the gap bigger, if I say the raw copy is $30 and the other one's $100, you look at them, they seem pretty similar to me. You know what? I'll take the $30 one. I can bring the price down to a level where you'll take the cheaper option in this case and just take it into your own hands. The point though is I still had to drop the price. The raw was already cheaper, but I didn't make it cheap enough. And that was the point in this scenario. So Eric, to kind of the point that I'm making here, all I'm saying is that I just took a scenario where I took someone who is knowledgeable in the hobby, and knowing that to my eye, they seem similar enough, I'd rather remove the risk from the equation. For 15 bucks, I'll remove the risk from the equation and just take it. But if you lower the price on the raw copy, but you've just proven to me that the raw copy is worth less. So if I'm a
Well,
seller, I know this
especially
too.
especially if it's a 9. I mean,
Yeah,
I when I started building that collection back there, that's actually what I targeted a lot of times
sure.
because you
Exactly.
could buy the 9 for essentially the price of the raw. And
Yeah.
so if I can get it already in the holder and know what I'm
Yes.
getting without question, then I'm going to spend the money to go ahead and buy it in the holder.
Hmm.
I don't need the holder,
Yep.
but if it's there and the price difference in that initial scenario is
It's small.
minute enough,
Yes.
I'll go ahead and buy the one in the holder. It's already there. I've stated that grading has become more vanity
Sure.
than necessarily conditional,
Mhm.
because people like how they're displayed. They feel that they're protected. They feel like there's confidence in what they're getting, and it just it's kind of it's not what grading was invented for, but it's kind
Mhm.
of what the hobby has allowed it to become.
Yeah.
So,
And that's the reason why I gave that specific scenario. I didn't pick a 10, and I made the gap small. So what I did in effect is I gave you a value proposition question. I'm saying same card. I'm saying they look, to your eye, they seem pretty similar grade. They're not going to be identical. They're not identical cards, but they seem similar enough. It seemed close. As a 9, you're like, yeah, that's still a nice card. And I didn't make it thousands of dollars, but I only gave you a $15 gap. So the answer was no. You know what? For me to take the risk, even though the risk isn't high stakes here, we're not talking huge dollars. No, you're going to have to make that a little cheaper for me. Maybe the answer is $80. Maybe the answer is 75. Maybe the answer is 60. But there is a number that you'll get down to where you're like, okay, for this price, even if I want to get it graded, well, now I can afford the difference. The savings has allowed me to take the risk. I'll submit it myself because there is a cost for grading too. But if you already took that out of my hands and the gap was small enough, well, then screw it. I'll just take the one that's already sitting in the holder and we're done. That's the value proposition. So the seller, though, is doing the same math. And let's say they bought both of those cars, the seller bought both of those cars for 20 bucks. They would have made money either way, but they know the one in the holder will sell faster, even though they made the raw one cheaper. They didn't make it cheaper enough to get it out the door quicker. The people will take the one in the plastic. That's why grading still exists, even on cars that quote unquote don't need it. That's why we still got a
well,
million cards a month.
and to be fair, it's a reason that I haven't been grading as many cards as I used to.
Sure.
I mean, when I was grading a ton of cards all the time, I would split my orders, what I wanted to sell, what I wanted to keep, and I would kind
Mhm.
of allow the sell to pay for what I was keeping, and I was building my collection that way. Now that the wax and all of that is more expensive, I'm not really opening anything,
Mhm.
and so there I'm not curating a lot of cards to sell because when I go to a show, I don't go in with this mindset of shopping to flip. I go in
Mhm.
shopping for things I want. And so the in with the values themselves suppressing like they have,
Mhm.
there's not a lot of stuff that I see the value in of sending in anymore. I can, I've told myself I don't need it in a slab right now for my personal stuff, and I'm not
Mhm.
selling as much as far as, new cards, new inventory, whatever. So
Yeah.
the need for the grading has been less for me.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I think the key though, to your point, being someone who also does resale, but being someone who also collects all those elements, basically what you're saying is that the benefit to whatever you could use, whether it's vanity or whether it's resale or whatever it is, the you don't have the inventory that would gain or benefit from it. Even in the scenario I just
right,
gave, just to make something more liquid, that's not fitting it. For your personal collection purposes, you don't need it. You don't need the fancy holder in this case, but you're also not gaining the value add piece. So you're not getting. So for you, it doesn't make sense because whatever amount it is to grade, it's not worth it. You're not getting the return, whether it's for your
right.
collection or whether it's on investment. You're still not getting the
I
return, so it doesn't make sense for you.
right. I send things in sometimes, very rarely anymore. And let's be honest, I have this right here. I don't grade everything. This is a very nice card.
Yep.
It's not graded. It sits on my desk in this, and you know, so I do have a lot of things that I could send in that would be
Mhm.
worth getting in a holder, but it's just it I still personally feel like that there's room, and maybe because of the company's expanded so much and cost of goods and everything has went up, it
Mhm.
feels like there's still room for the pricing to decrease,
Sure.
but I
Okay.
don't know that it will because of the expansions, because of the amount of staffing, again, the resources, the cost of supplies and everything have went up. I don't know that it will. So,
I think the so I've expressed this opinion before, and then we'll kind of we'll close a loop on it here, because I thought we started off down one direction, and then I thought it was an interesting conversation, basically discussing what the value of grading is right now. Because that's really what the discussion became a little bit. And I'll add one more piece here at the end, but to your point, maybe the base price not necessarily decreasing, even though we'd like it as collectors. Look, as collectors, I'd like it to be $1 a card, and I'd like it to be, 1 hour turnaround. I make the jokes. I make the joke about the SGC thing. I want it in the velvet bag. I want the helicopter service, hand delivery. $1 a card for an hour turnaround. But that's not realistic. But that doesn't mean there can't be specials. That doesn't mean there can't be sales where for specific categories for a limited time you can submit X, and then if you happen to have those cards, if all of a sudden, hey, Victor Robles, $5 a card, go nuts. Okay, fine.
uh,
Maybe there's a
I have
couple that
a
might work
lot
for
of
me.
them to do.
Yeah, but because it hits a very specific niche that might make sense to you, okay, maybe a couple. For $5 a card, what the hell? But
Yep.
for other categories, it might not make sense for you. You might be like, you know what, this one's fine. This one's fine in a one touch. It's fine in a top loader or whatever. We're good. We don't need it. It's fine. But for other folks, it just depends. Right now, I'm seeing that the numbers are still holding strong for what it is because certain people are finding value in it. And the one other piece I'll add that's in the same vein as that hypothetical I gave you. Okay, so you go to eBay and you're looking at it. You're looking at some of those 90s cards that maybe have chipping issues or certain condition sensitivities. You don't need a 10. You're not looking for a 10. You're just looking for a half decent copy. Well, eBay scans lie. eBay scans aren't the greatest. Now, eBay is good about buyer protection now. If it's just flat out wrong, it doesn't look the way it should, you get it in the hand, it's like, oh, this is junk. You can return it. You can do that. eBay will allow it, but it's a bit of a pain in the ass. Or you could be like, oh, okay, it's a 7, it's an 8. Maybe for an issue that is specific to prone to chipping. You say, oh, an 8's fine. So you see it, it's an 8. It looks decent enough from the images. Okay, fine. Pull the trigger and buy it. Versus a raw copy, it seems okay, but the scan isn't the greatest, so I can't really tell. Like, all right, I guess I have to. Maybe you reach out to them and say, "Can you give me a better scan? Can you put some lighting on it? It seems like there's something there. Is that a shadow? Is that a scratch? What the heck is that?" For the seller, it becomes the additional work. For the buyer, it also becomes the additional work because you're not trying to find a perfect copy, but you're trying to find a decent copy you can live with. And now you two have to interpret what the card looks like from a distance, as opposed to a show where you can handle it and look at it yourself. There is a value to that. It does make it more liquid. It removes some of that discussion. Even if you don't agree with the final grade necessarily, at least you have a baseline to argue about, if that makes sense.
I think I think too in general, but and I'm gonna give Eric a little bit of a touch on his point with the grading
Sure.
potentially could suppress if we are correct on the stat of people decreasing in the hobby,
Mhm.
then of course grading would probably follow suit
Yeah.
because you're not going to have a smaller audience with basically with what you're describing on the seller side of it. If there's less people in selling, there's going to be less overall transactions happening to begin with,
Yep.
and things are going to get saturated. Values would take a more of a hit, which
Yep.
then would make less and less and less things even worth the risk of grading, even if you did
Correct.
want to flip it. So there is an element there if the prediction of the amount of people in the hobby does decrease, the grading could very well follow.
Yeah. I think it becomes a chicken or the egg situation. And the way I would put it is in the scenario that we're discussing here, I think it's the removal of demand and a drop in price that would hurt grading. Not corruption, not people suddenly deciding that they don't like slabs anymore because they're submitting them no problem. It'll be like, oh, it's not worth it for me anymore. It's more like your scenario.
Hmm.
It's not that I couldn't, is that for what you're asking me price wise, it is not worth it for me for what I would have gotten out of this at a different price point where the value was different. If I can submit the card, get a 10 and it goes from $50 to $500, it might be worth spinning the wheel. Because, hey, worst case scenario, it comes back a 9, it's still a nice card.
Mhm.
But if it becomes a 10, then suddenly there's a value add there that I can do something with if I wish. And otherwise, I
Yeah,
can go
and
get another copy if I want.
it's just more, I haven't been opening wax and stuff anymore, so the return on getting new cards that need, that I'm looking to sell that need the slab is just decreased. So
Correct. Exactly. And I agree with that. I think it'll be demand that leads that. Okay. So, Eric, I know we dominated that for a little bit. We went through a couple of back and forth angles. Is there anything else you want to add in there before we kind of put a button on this one?
No, I think we covered it pretty well from all aspects.
Yeah. And like in this situation, I think we can all, we played out a hypothetical because we don't know. We don't have the crystal ball on activated. We could be completely wrong. The market, because stock market go gangbusters for some reason. All of a sudden we're flush with cash again. It's like, to the moon. Let's go. We have no idea. I'm not holding my breath on that. I wouldn't expect that, but you never know. Or it could just stabilize and just kind of be where it is. In which case, it's not a dramatic increase and not a dramatic decrease, and it just kind of hovers for a while.
Something else that we didn't really mention, but there's nobody that's coming off the top of my head. I don't like what prospects are out there that anybody is too hyped or excited about. Like we got Wemby
Joe
in
Flacco.
basketball already.
Joe Flacco, huge. Joe Flacco.
Well, yeah, I mean outside of Flacco, but
okay, fair enough.
There's not a lot, like you don't hear the hype machine. You don't have the Zions. You don't have,
What, Connor Bedard doesn't do it for you? You wait until that
he's
Connor
already
Bedard
in the
mania.
league.
But we don't have the good card yet. We don't have the good card yet, though. If we're talking about for the hype, we have the player, but we don't have the card yet. We don't have access to it. Like literally, we don't have it.
Right.
Yeah.
He's also in hockey, and no offense because I love hockey and collecting, but hockey isn't going to survive the hobby.
You wait until Geoff goes full scale in the top 5. It's Connor Bedard.
It might happen, but yeah, I mean, realistically,
maybe Joe Flacco. Maybe Joe Flacco is one of the top 5 there. Joe Flacco is one of the top 5 to round it out.
Yeah, but I do see that as another element.
I never thought that you and I were ever really going to be best friends, but after that hockey comment, I got nothing for you.
Wow. Oh well, on that bombshell.
Being honest.
If you were being honest, you'd be back on the Joe Flacco pump wagon this week. It'd be like, guys, wacko for Flacco. Let's go. Hey, listen.
No,
the dream
we're almost getting to the playoffs. I don't want to play the freaking Browns.
I'm just saying, look, we will revisit this conversation. The dream continues. The Browns are in the playoffs. We're gonna find.
I know.
Look, I'm rooting for this narrative. I want it. It's gonna be Eric. Nothing would be more fun for me than if Flacco somehow goes on a run. I don't care. It can stop at any point. If he gets a couple of rounds in, and all of a sudden everybody's like, "Oh my God, wacko for," dude, that'd be amazing. That's what I want. I want this.
I'm all in on the Browns.
Like, let's do this. Like, I'm 100%. Look, if it can't be the Packers, I'm in. Let's go. I want this man to have a statue outside in Cleveland.
My favorite player in the league is Chubb, and he got hurt like on the first day, right? And I was like, oh, there goes the Brown season. Any chance they had, and here they are without their star running back, and they're playing this well.
And a $250 million man sitting on the sideline holding a clipboard.
I'm just like, you got to be kidding me. So, no, I'm all in on the Browns because the Pats are a joke. So I'm all in.
You like this guy?
Yeah, there's your guy.
I was never a Flacco hater. I had no problem with him as a quarterback or a player. I couldn't understand in the past while people were like, well, yeah, he won a Super Bowl, but he sucks. And he's done this, but he sucks. And I'm just like, it doesn't make any sense.
To be fair, as a Ravens fan and watching Flacco in the good and in the good times and in the bad, I made a point before the game this week. We were chatting about the scenario in the Discord, and somebody made the reference against the Jets that they were taking the Jets defense and so was going to get an interception or something. And I said, predicting that Joe Flacco is going to throw an interception is a no-brainer Because if you look at his stats, although he has played very well since taking over the helm for the Browns, he has thrown at least one interception in every single game.
Well, I think it's a math problem because for a guy who's throwing over 300 yards like every single game, that means he throws a lot. So if you're throwing as much as he is and not running, right, that statistically your chances of having more interceptions go up. So if you don't have a balanced offense and your quarterback is forced to throw 300 plus yards every single game, the chances that you're going to have an interception mathematically increase.
Yeah.
Okay, but
So I will
hang on.
say this. Go ahead. I have the stats in front of me too, so I was just going to read one. If you,
What is
I
his
assume you pulled up
attempt?
the stats.
What is his attempt?
His attempts, 204 attempts.
204 attempts, and I believe he is at 9 interceptions.
He's got 8 here. This is what I see on Pro Football Reference.
Okay. 8 interceptions on only 200 attempts. And I get you're saying it's a math problem, but I guarantee you there is quarterbacks in the NFL that probably have way higher attempts with less interceptions.
You're talking to a Patriots fan right now who Bailey Zappi had 3 interceptions in one game.
Yes, but your team can't even decide what quarterback you're going to use, and they both throw interceptions.
So Belichick hates Mac Jones so much that when Zappi throws 3 interceptions, he will not switch him out for Mac Jones. That's how much he hates Mac Jones.
Because he swapped Mac Jones out for Bailey Zappi, and Bailey Zappi ended the game with an interception, so it doesn't matter. He's damned if he does, damned if he don't. They're both going to throw interceptions.
After your 3rd interception, today's not your day. Let's see if someone else can have a better day.
I think he's playing. I think Bill Belichick is playing the percentage. He goes, mathematically speaking, the odds of a 4th interception is less. So I think we'll be all right. Give it a go.
He should just run the Wildcat without a quarterback.
So it's got to be better.
So I was going to say real quick, through the 5 games, small sample size, I enjoyed. He's averaged 323 yards per game passing. That's the average over small sample over the course. Well, you got to remember, there's like the Mahomes year where he threw for comfortably over 5,000. Drew Brees has had some crazy seasons where he's thrown for tons of yards.
Yeah, we got Brady here, we got Peyton Manning there. I mean, but in 5 games in a row with over 300. I mean,
that's never happened with multiple touchdowns. He's the first to do it.
It's insane.
I would remember. You guys keep forgetting about what those years in New Orleans where Brees was. There was a year where in 16 games, Drew Brees was averaging 342 yards per game.
That's
that was his average.
This is the first
over
time
16
a player
games.
has done it since joining a team.
I agree. Yeah. But look, and by the way, I'm not discounting Joe Flacco here. I'm saying he's performing extremely well. But I'm also pointing out that, hey, there have been some like historically crazy years. But Drew Brees was in the middle of an offense that he was running. He knew the offense. He had been doing it for years. Sean Payton and he were on the same page. And those were the years where he was leading the league and throwing 5,000 yards passing per season. So they were obviously in a roll. That offense was a finely tuned machine that he had mastery of. Joe Flacco walking in off the street off his couch and averaging 300 yards per game. That's actually extremely impressive. The offense is good, but like he's actually taken the reins very well. Like, and it's the point I made in the Discord. He's not just game managing. 300 yards a game is not game managing. It means you're slinging the football a little bit.
Right.
So in this case, he's going to throw some interception. Yeah, but the point is he's also hitting the receivers. He's hitting his receivers. They're making plays, and he's throwing some interceptions, but he's also throwing touchdowns. And if you're throwing touchdowns and you're getting down the field and you're moving the ball, the guy has almost 44,000 passing yards in his career. It's not like the guy has never thrown the football well. Like he, if nothing else.
And he played on the Jets.
He did play on the Jets. That's right. So regardless, we'll give the man his credit. And by the way, in that 5-game sample size, he has thrown for 13 touchdowns in the 5 games.
Mm-hmm.
13 touchdowns. That is the most touchdowns he has thrown since 2017. And that was in 16 games. He's thrown for 13 touchdowns.
I'm all in. That's my team. I'm supporting.
You're wacko for Flacco? You're in?
Yeah, I mean, I love stories like this. There hasn't been a story like this since Kurt Warner when he was stocking shelves at the food pantry or whatever at that supermarket, and the next thing you know, he's winning a Super Bowl ring. I mean, this stuff is fun. This is why sports is fun, and this is the stuff I like. So I'm all in.
It's about rooting for the narrative, man. We like it. So this podcast is officially Wacko for Flacco. We're in. Let's do it. Let's see what happens. Look, I'll be entertained either way. I am rooting for. I am rooting though. I want to see him. I want to see him have a couple of good performances down the stretch. Win, lose, or draw. I want to see him have some couple of good performances down the stretch, and we'll see. Because I was listening to a couple of folks discussing it, and it sounds like Flacco's been having a good time with this run. Just again, coming off the couch, he thought his career was over, like it's done and whatever, and he's had this resurgence. It sounds like he's keen on playing another season because obviously he's playing well.
Why wouldn't he?
Yeah, like this is the best run he's been on in half a decade. So it's like if he's got some gas in the tank. Now here's the question though, and just quick. This is a quick thought, just to finish off here on a fun note, on a fun hypothetical. Okay, let's say he finishes, and let's say he has a nice playoff run. I'm not having the Browns win the Super Bowl. I'm not losing my mind here. But let's say he has a good performance in the playoffs. Maybe wins a round, which would be phenomenal. They borderline will build a statue for him outside the stadium at this point for the Browns history. Yeah, they may as well. However, you got the $250 million man over there. Like, what do you do? You're sitting there looking at an offense that is running pretty smooth with Joe Flacco very nicely. It's running on all cylinders. You're like, what are we doing here?
No, you can't keep the old guy, no matter how good of a season he has. You got to go with the young kid with the big contract and see where
that's what the logic would dictate. But I don't know. I just never felt like Deshaun, I think, was starting to get his rhythm a little bit before he got hurt, but he hasn't been like good in a bit. Like since the whole situation out of Houston, like he just hasn't looked like particularly good.
If Flacco ends up in a place like not I'm not saying 100%, but a place like New England as a band-aid to try to right the ship and help bring along a young quarterback that's going to take his place when he decides enough's enough.
I like it. I think he goes in to mentor a young Thomas Edward Patrick Beavis Butthead Brady, who will come back for no reason at age 417. I will save the franchise.
He'd be better. He'd be better than what we have right now.
Probably. Look, for all my Brady hate, he's probably right.
If he came off his couch, signed as a free agent, and started next Sunday, he would be better than what we have right now.
A vote of confidence from Eric for the New England Patriots. There you go. Perfect. All right. So any last thoughts, gentlemen, before we wind her down? We had a little bit of fun there at the tail end. I thought it'd be a little fun just to have a light conversation there at the end. And like I said, we're Wacko for Flacco here. So we're appreciating it. We're enjoying it.
We're just letting everyone know what you have to look forward to. It's the first day of the year, and this is how the episode went.
Yeah, it is. It is. Well, with that said, thank you, Brandon, Bobbles and Ball Cards, and 540 Flips. We'll see down the road here. I think one of the goals, I think, is to maybe occasionally throw the odd additional video in there here and there, pick up a couple of the content side of things. So we'll let that play out, and best of luck to you in getting that started in the new year, since we're just turning over the calendar to it. Eric Sanderson DeOr on Instagram. He is the Bastion of Positivity for 2024. Those of you who see the video side now understand that he is leading the charge of positivity into 2024. And otherwise, it'll be more of the same. Been having a lot of fun with these episodes. You also got a taste of a little bit of what I'd like to do is we'll recap and touch on a couple of topics if there's some kind of an update. And then obviously on the Friday live streams, if anything comes of that, we'll have more of a lively, spirited conversation, a little bit serious, 5% less mature, at least. Yes.
What's positivity?
I don't understand what it means. Carlos looked it up and read it to me, but I didn't understand.
I'm actually impressed that you actually squinted in to read it closely. I typed it in like 4 seconds, man. I'm sorry that I wasn't doing a clackety clack on your louder one. Just to make
you
Brandon...
typed it in.
Yeah, I just typed it in quickly. We were actually on the live stream.
Okay, we
were on the live stream. Yeah.
For everyone, we figured out, if you made it this far, we figured out at the end it is spelled wrong.
No. That's canon.
Go with it. Well, actually, you know what? I'll be honest.
Positivity.
So first of all, given that it is Eric, positivity might be more accurate. You know, typo on my part, perhaps a Freudian typo though. A lot more accurate than the other alternative. Yeah. That'll be a Freudian typo. That's a new one for you. But yes. All right. We have corrected. We have righted an egregious wrong. That's what you wanted to end. That's what you wanted to pause the close.
I noticed it, and I didn't want to like not mention it because I just noticed it.
That was what the same thing that it said in the live stream last night. It literally was the same.
I demand that you put it back the way it was.
All right. That's it for this episode. Episode 54. We're back. More episodes on episodes drop on Tuesday. Live streams on Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern time. We'll get a dictionary and figure out how to spell things between now and then. And Wacko for Flacco. Hashtag Wacko for Flacco. Embrace the movement. Embrace the narrative, people. All right. That's it for us. Have a good one. We'll catch you in the next one.
Good night.